economy is a theater that survives under the umbrella of politics. A facade over the hidden centers of power. Israel had never seen days like this before.
People are mobilized in the war because consumption goes down.
The conflict in Gaza has dealt a major blow to several sectors of Israel's economy. Israel's central bank says the offensive is costing the economy a staggering $600 million a week.
There are thousands of businesses that are down significantly, more than 50%. In fact, Eilat is paying the heaviest price of this war.
I've worked here for 20 years and have never seen anything like this.
An early end to this war is not certain, but a budget deficit in the next year is.
Israel's central bank estimates the war cost at $69 billion over 2023 to 2025. Borrowing is going up to near record levels. The country's 2024 budget comes with a deficit of 6.6.
An approximate closure of economic arteries and a catastrophic rise in expenses.
That they have to pay more for the goods, they have to pay more for the cars. Just to remind you that the supply of cars and other goods that are coming from the Far East now are not able to cross the areas where the Houthis are targeting the ships, so they have to go around Africa, which sometimes doubles the prices of the goods.
Without any security, the economy will come to a close. Now, truly, did everything begin with a war? It might be hard to believe that the deterioration of economic indices would go back to the pre-October 7th period.
At the diversification alarm bells ringing, but sentiment had already been dropping before the war.
More than 2.5 million living in poverty. This is 1/3 of Israel's population.
1 in 5 Israelis lives in poverty.
A new report says Israelis are growing increasingly poorer.
The most expensive place on earth for living is Israel.
A new list published by the Economist Intelligence Unit ranking Tel Aviv as the #1 most expensive city in the world.
Such a system is the natural cause of unemployment.
We're talking about 1 million unemployed. So yes, Israel will, excuse me?
That's about 1 in 9 Israelis.
Yeah, it's incredible. And we had one of the lowest unemployment numbers in the world. We had 3% unemployment. It was a joke.
In Israel, commodity prices are soaring.
If you look at the prices of food, they have increased by 9 percentage points just this past month. If you look at petrol, increased substantially over the past few months. So all of these things bring up the cost of living, groceries. Everything you want to buy these days is much more expensive.
Purchasing a tiny apartment is like a dream, even after working for 10 years.
We have 4 kids, the 5th on the way, and we are nowhere close to buying an apartment. It's very, very hard for us as a young couple.
Watching the homeless is not a surprise. High inflation rates have made it almost impossible for Israelis to buy a house.
People feel that it's incredibly difficult to live. It's impossible to buy an apartment. And that's why it's so painful, and the government is completely complacent.
Soaring prices, low salaries, an equation that has no answer but to emigrate.
We are here because the prices of everything rising in Israel. It's just becoming impossible to live here.
But why is all this economic challenge for Israel?
Why the cost of living in Israel is so high.
It seems that Israel is not just facing a minor problem in governance, but rather a strategic factor is involved. A problem that goes back to Israel's political economy. Occupation is an inseparable part of Israel's daily survival, which is entwined with the system's culture and politics. The economy is no exception either. Israel's political and security instability has brought about economic instability.
The Israeli economy created by the Israeli government, where Israel is not just any other Western country which adopts privatization policies as part of its neoliberal approach. We see these policies all around the world, but the divergence is because Israel is also facing the kind of expenses and the kind of economic challenges that most countries don't experience, and that has a lot to do with the occupation of Palestinian territory and the repression of Palestinian resistance.
Such a cycle of uncertainty in Israel's political economy unveiled itself completely in the October 7th war.
The primary reasons why Moody downgraded the Israeli rating is due to political risks and geopolitical risks, which are likely to persist even after the conflict ends. Political risks plays a huge role for the economy, so it's far from clear how the economy can recover, if recover, and how. So all of those are huge uncertainties.
Israel marked its presence in the Middle East through occupation. Therefore, the outcome of such a political system has been a military economy.
Israel has become almost a military base. The main thing the government is concerned about is security and keeping the status quo and preventing Palestinians from uprising against Israeli occupation. And this, of course, is an unsustainable situation. That you cannot have economic policy when you always have only the military policy.
An economy that thrives on the amount of progress in occupation. Such a process was solely built on stealing Palestine's natural gas fields.
A huge gas field, the Leviathan gas field, which contains 22 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, is just off of Gaza's coast. And this is just one of the many reserves of fossil fuels that are in Israel, in the occupied territory of Palestine.
Israel's occupation also went on in the Gaza gas fields, a long-term project which continues until today.
Invading Gaza in December 2008, and it was that invasion that took all of those gas fields off the coast of Gaza under Israeli control.
The Zionists' lasting fantasy, exporting Palestine's stolen gas to Europe.
ונקדם את התוכנית להנחת צינור גז בין ישראל לאירופה. אני מקווה שהתוכנית הזאת תצא לפועל, משום שהיא תהפוך את ישראל למעצמת גז, לא אזורית, אלא כבר בקנה מידה.
Israel's tourism industry, another example of an occupation-centered economy. The lands stolen, from the Golan Heights to the Mediterranean. With such a conduct, it is no surprise that the occupation economy experiences constant turbulence. Israel's tourism industry is a perfect example of the situation.
Tourism basically, or tourism-related jobs, make up 6% of total employment. It's a huge sector. It's one of their key income sources, and we're talking about 2.5 million tourists who visited, including pilgrims, up until the war. And they were expecting another 2.5 million in this next period, and the war hit right at peak season, and none of those are going to be coming.
The World Capital for Technology or Startup Nation are titles we have all heard about Israel. But just like other sectors of Israel's economy depends on US-backed occupation, the tech industry is also completely dependent on the United States support. And like other features of Israel,
if America struggles, there's less money, there'll be less foreign direct investment, startups and tech companies, which is the driving growth behind Israel's economy, will slow down, growth will stop.
The tech sector appears more of a small showcase of Silicon Valley than a modern image of Israel.
I would just say that in principle, Israel is a small open economy, heavily dependent on investments from the US in the tech sector.
After October 7th, this tiny showcase has only managed to survive through money injected into the system by the US. Subsequently, the technology sector is just a small part of Israel's reliant economic network. Since the end of World War II, Israel is the only spot in the world which has received the highest amount of financial aid from the United States. The flow of money pumped into Israel not only fell short of solving economic problems, but also prepared the grounds for wide-scale corruption among the leaders of God's chosen tribe.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appeared in a Jerusalem court this morning as the opening stages of his corruption trial get underway.
Huge corruption cases and constant court hearings and even imprisonment have become normal among Israeli officials.
Israel's former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert has been freed from prison after being granted parole. The 71-year-old was granted early release last week after serving 16 of his 27-month corruption sentence.
The organized corruption of heirs to the Holy Land that are born in a mafia-style oligarchy-centered economy.
Israel is very centralized in terms of capital. About 18 families in Israel control roughly 60% of the equity value of all companies in Israel. So it's concentrated in the hands of 18 families.
That's why Israel's economic situation today is not surprising at all. Mind-blowing living expenses, daily confessions of right and leftist leaders.
הממשלה הזאת תוביל מערכה נחושה ביוקר המחיה. יוקר המחיה הוא מכת מדינה ואנחנו נחושים לטפל בו. לא יכול להיות שתהיה פה מדינה עשירה עם אזרחים שלא גומרים את החודש. את זה אנחנו משנים עכשיו.
המלחמה ביוקר המחיה נמצאת בראש סדר העדיפות הלאומית של הממשלה שלנו. ואנחנו נפעל בנחישות ובעוצמה כדי להוריד מחירים בכל התחומים.
And making false promises one after another are nothing but escaping forward by the politicians.
The Zionists who control all these communities have to make good on their promise to at least help the poorest Jews.
There is no cure to a sick economy built on occupation and violation. It's all over with the right and left. The entire system has turned into the embodiment of an all-out crisis.
בגלל שדבר ראשון, זה לא עניין של ימין או שמאל, זה עניין של כולנו, של כל העם. אנחנו צריכים לצאת ולהילחם ביוקר המחיה, אנחנו צריכים לבוא ולהיות אזרחים אפקטיביים, אזרחים מעורבים, שמשפיעים בצורה חכמה. הבעיה פה זה לא ביבי וזה לא כחלון, זו השיטה.
Getting closer to the brink of economic collapse, a million-strong emigration takes place.
This just massive collapse in economic activity. You also have a huge number of Israelis, estimates are around 500,000, who have just left the country.